So when I think of resilience, I think when anyone's trying to live a good life, one thing that's really important is making sure that you're comparing yourself today to who you were yesterday and trying to be just a little bit better.
Yeah.
Right? Whether that be in relationships with other people, whether that be spiritually, physically, emotionally, mentally, just kind of those small improvements. But I think resilience comes in when someone has years of growth and development, and then life comes and just demolishes that growth. Resilience is when you have those tough situations still going forward.
Welcome to another episode of Relentlessly Resilient, where real people share real life experiences and the tools they've developed to move forward and live their best lives. I'm Jennie Taylor.
And I'm Michelle Scharf. Today we are here for part 2 of our series with George Ferris. George is a friend that I met through politics. And in our first episode, we learned about his life growing up with his mother, Esther Ruth, and the qualities of resilience and lessons that she instilled in him, the things that really have mattered most in his life and how it's impacted him today. George, we're glad to have you back.
I'm glad to be back.
So today you're going to talk a little bit about you. Why don't we start off? We heard a lot of different qualities of resilience that your mom clearly had in her life. She very much understood the situation she was in, was able to be aware of it, and also be able to look beyond it. So one of the stories you shared was that Christmas morning comes and all of the toys had been stolen from the vehicle, and her thought was to sit down and pray for this person because this person needed Christ in their life more than your family needed these gifts. And such a powerful lesson for kids at a time when, you know, such a violation had occurred. Beautiful story of her able to see the situation for what it is and to call it out, which is the first step of resilience. I loved hearing that. Tell me, what does resilience mean to you?
So when I think of resilience, I think of a couple things. So initially, I think of when anyone's trying to live a good life, I think one thing that's really important is making sure that you're comparing yourself today to who you were yesterday and trying to be just a little bit better.
Yeah.
Right? Whether that be in relationships with other people, whether that be spiritually, physically, emotionally, mentally, just kind of those small improvements. But I think resilience comes in, and it's when someone has years of growth and development, and then life comes and just demolishes that growth. Something goes in there, and you have a bunch of major steps back. The definition of resilience to me is starting going forward again when those moments come. You know, like when my mom passed, I had my mom had been such a foundational piece of my life, and then my foundation's gone, right? And figuring out, okay, well, this is the situation I'm in now. How do I go forward? I think resilience is when you have those tough situations still going forward.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
Because you will still have the tough situations go forward, right? We've talked about that so many times before. We bring you on the show and say, tell us this one hard thing you've ever survived, as if there were only ever one hard thing any of us have ever survived.
Right.
And we almost make resilience episodic, right?
Right.
My husband died and I was resilient. My mom had kidney failure, I was resilient. When in reality, the real resilience is that long game.
Right.
So,
which is the entire point of the show, right?
Right. No, and that's why
that we all have a million stories. But the reason we all need to improve in resiliency is so that we can continue to endure the hard things that will come. Because
that's why your definition is so beautiful. A little bit better tomorrow, a little bit stronger tomorrow, a little bit more ready next time something falls apart, because it probably will.
And the other thing about it is it doesn't necessarily have to be a major thing that sets you back.
Absolutely.
You know, I've had days where it's been a small thing in the morning, you know, an hour later, another small thing happens, an hour later, another small thing happens, 15 minutes after that, something small happens. And then, you know, my cat throws up on the ground, and all of a sudden I'm no longer resilient that day.
Right.
I'm only laughing because it's so true. Like, you can survive the biggest hurricane, and then the teeniest thing is like just that last, like, I'm done. That's it. I'm out. I love that you said that. That's so real.
That is very real. And it is true, right? Like, when we're working to be our best self a little bit better every day, sometimes it is the little small things. Like, sometimes for me, it could be my son who's recovering from an injury, getting up and not having very much patience for me. And I can just be like, I'm just tired of this whole situation, right? And like, sometimes you have to go take yourself out for a few minutes and kind of realign to get back on the resilience game, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, you listed out your mom had a rough go at things, and she had kids that she clearly loved and made a priority. What has life been since you lost your mom, and how have you been able to take these lessons and apply them with the challenges that have come from the loss of her?
Yeah, there's never a good time to lose a parent, right? And I had lost my mom my mom had a stroke about it was 2016. So I'd been married for about 2.5 years. But
Can I ask, how old were you and how old was your mother when she passed?
She passed right before I was turning 27.
So young.
My mom was
You're 27 at the time of your mother's passing, and she's 57. That's still pretty young for both of you.
Yeah.
It's far too young to die of organ failure of any kind.
Mm-hmm.
And when she had her stroke, like I said in the last episode last week, my 12-year-old brother was her primary caregiver at the time. He was 16, and she had a stroke, and she could no longer take care of him. And so overnight, I became the legal guardian of a teenager.
Wow.
And so
27 years old, new marriage.
So you're the
2.5
oldest of the
years.
3 kids.
the oldest of
Of your mom and dad's.
Yeah.
Sure.
She had a previous marriage where she had another older sibling.
Okay.
But he wasn't.
You're the oldest brother of that little brother who now needs a guardian and a caretaker.
Yeah.
Wow.
And going from brother to guardian overnight is not an easy transition. So we really struggled with it. I had never signed a kid up for a school, so we had to go take him to school and get him enrolled. He moved from California to Utah, actually on Pioneer Day that year. We told him that people heard he was coming, so there were going to be fireworks.
We're trying to put a positive spin on it.
Yeah. So, but he moved in. We got him enrolled in school, and another kind of funny story on that is we went to back to school night, and the teacher, when we walked in, my wife's a couple years younger than me, and so they're like, so who's a student here? Is it? And they thought my wife was a student.
Yeah, she's clearly not old enough to be the mother.
Yeah. So it was such a unusual situation to be in, right? And the other thing is, like, my brother and I love my brother. I had moved out at 19, so when he was 9. So it had been 6-7 years since we had seen each other consistently like that. And so he was a great kid. He's a great adult, but it was tough. So that happened. Then my mom passed away. At the time, I was working in campaigns, and there wasn't any position that seemed kind of consistent for in politics at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think I could do another campaign where there'd be some months where, like,
there's no income.
Yeah, exactly. And that's
people think campaigning is glorious and amazing, but it's not a stable living necessarily.
I didn't have health insurance at the time, so I had a minor I was taking care of. So I ended up having to switch careers, which I really struggled with because I'd always wanted to be in politics. I remember being a 10-year-old trying to talk to my friends about politics, and they would tell me they would tell me
so weird.
Yeah, exactly. And so what 10-year-old cares about policy? But
oh, bless your heart.
So I got into finance, which was a really tough transition. And so I started working that, and I kind of had a mental break. I had a breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I honestly did. my mom had just passed. We had taken my little brother as being a guardian, and I had changed careers, new marriage. It was within 2 years of us being married that this took place.
And did you have any children at this point of your own? Okay.
We didn't. We were actually going to start having kids, but
It's a major curveball to that.
yeah. And so it was years later before we had.
Okay.
I have 2 young kids now.
Yeah.
But on top of that, we were trying to make ends meet, and both of my wife got her degree in sociology, and I got mine in political science, which typically aren't the highest paying degrees on the planet. And so I kind of started pushing my wife, like, hey, you should go back to school and get a master's degree. And I started doing a master's degree too at the time. So we both started an MBA on top of all this.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
And a friend of mine who I was talking to about, I knew from my upbringing, I didn't know anything about money. And so that's actually why I found a job in finance, just because I needed to learn about this. And so I was talking to him, and he was telling me, like, hey, you should get into real estate. Like, that's what you should buy income properties. And so on top of that, we bought a triplex, and we moved into one side of it.
Wow.
Does that insult injury? Injury to insult? How do you say
So,
that?
and, my wife, like, is such a phenomenal person. This whole time, she's telling me, like, hey, you need to stop, slow down. Like, you have had multiple big things happen in life, and you're just going. And, like, I call it my quarter life crisis, because, I hopefully live to 100, but it was just all these things I was doing at one time to try and cope with this massive loss. And I was dealing with my childhood, where there's so much insecurity on things. Like, last time I talked about how we lost Christmas morning, right? There's insecurity of housing, where we were moving from different places. And I was looking at this family that I have, a wife and my little brother, and saying, this will never happen to them. I'm never going to let anything hard like this happen to them. And which is kind of a noble thing, but it's also not a realistic thing. And I was really setting myself up for some real burnout and some real kind of tough times.
Yeah.
Shortly after I bought the triplex, it ended up going well. I finished my bachelor's degree, and my wife ended up getting a good paying job as well. But then we got my little brother to be 18, and we couldn't really afford to keep living the way we were. So I had to say, hey, like, my little brother's name's Ian. And so, at 18, we're like, either you go off to college or you go off on your own, right?
Right.
And he really struggled with that. And it put a big damper on my relationship with my brother, because I was in a role that I wasn't really designed to be in that role for him. But at the end of the day, like, you have to do what you have to do, right? And so since he says, like, hey, you making me do that really turned out to be one of the best things for me. He's 23 now. He's doing very well. He's on his own, renting a house, and he's doing really well, has a career he loves. But at the time, it was extremely difficult as well. So I've got my brother frustrated at me, my wife not happy with kind of how I'm doing things. We end up buying another property, because if I'm going in, I'm going in. So we move again, and I start really getting in kind of a place of anger, where I don't have my mom. I've got everyone around me has their mom, and I don't. My mom was great. I'm not in the career I always wanted to be in, even though I was in that for a little bit. And I'd never been someone who dealt with anxiety, really. I was someone who kind of I felt like it was one of my strengths, and I was having panic attacks. And then, I was applying for a bunch of jobs, and I basically got this job that was, it was going to be like a dream job, honestly, where I'd be going around the country doing kind of political stuff. I was ecstatic. The dream job basically was I'd be doing initiatives. It was actually green energy initiatives. And so a lot of like trying to build up like solar panels in areas where there's no other land, where there was like nothing else, and just kind of do. And I was really excited about it, to be honest. And I had the job, and then the pandemic hit, and then they said, we're not going to hire anyone until after this pandemic because we don't know what's going to happen. And I never heard back from them. And so, like,
Wow.
yeah. And so it just felt like, and that was kind of the straw that broke the camel back, because there was a couple other jobs before that where they're like, hey, we love you, but there's just one other person who has just a little bit more experience. And I kept getting second place, and for about a year and a half of trying to get jobs that were really trying to get me back into the political realm. And so I really was getting in a place of like anger and depression, and it was just stuff I'd never really dealt with before. And so the pandemic hits, right? Which, the pandemic was rough for everyone. Locked in the house now, and I just realized something has to change.
Okay, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to hear the rest of this story. We'll be right back. And we're back. George, tell us.
And I realized things had to change. And so since my mom passed, I was really reevaluating everything. And I'd been kind of dealing with bits and pieces throughout this entire time, but I hadn't quite addressed it, really fully addressed it. As we left the last episode, I talked about how the night before my mom passed, I prayed for her healing. I went to church, and the service was about praying big prayers, and I was like, yeah, this is it. I'm gonna pray a big prayer. And my mom passed the next day, and so I just had a lot of anger with the world around me, with God, and I really struggled. And so one thing that kind of taught me this, and I'm not, I know everyone has their own ways of dealing with struggles, and really for me, one of them was faith, right? And seeing my mom pass, it really shook that foundation in faith. And so I had to think, okay, is this something I really believe, or do I not believe it? Like, that's where it's at. And so I looked at what I prayed, right? And I said, hey, I want healing, right? My mom had gone through so much and was in a state where she was happy, because my mom really found joy in everything, but she wasn't thriving like she wanted, right? And so really in that situation, it's not the answer I wanted, but it's the answer that I got of like, hey, if I believe that,
what was that last little bit for her? I mean, what you said she was okay at that point. Was she healthy, or was she struggling?
She was happy.
Uh-huh.
Her health had been like teetering.
Uh-huh.
But my mom was the type of person where I heard people say like, hey, Esther's the type of person where you're on the tracks and she's going this way, and you can either go along with her or you can get off the tracks, right?
Uh-huh.
And so my mom was going to get stuff done, and she wasn't in a state where she really could do that.
Yeah.
And so like I think that
like the night before she died, was there any indication? Was she in the hospital, or was she?
She'd been at home.
Okay.
She'd been at home being taken care of by my aunt, but she'd been in that state for almost a year. She couldn't walk anymore at that point. She was, they'd take her by stretcher to dialysis and back. She couldn't really take care of herself. Mm-hmm. But like another story that's kind of connected to is like, hey, we were, hopefully my aunt never hears this episode. So
it's always the best part of the story. Like, there are other people involved in my life. Sorry, people.
So we were all in my grandma's house, and it was my aunt. We're picking on her, and she's like, "I'm gonna go hang out with my real friends. I'm gonna go call my real friends." And my sister was saying like, "You don't have any other friends. Like, we're your friends. You're not. Who are you gonna call? Like, who are you calling in this situation? There's no one for you to call." And my mom, who could only speak above a whisper at this point, like just barely, and she called us over and was like, "Hand me that notepad." And I gave her a notepad, and she wrote down a message. She was like, "Who are you gonna call? Ghostbusters."
Oh, such a great sense of humor.
And like, she was just super adamant about this. And so like at the end of the day, it was still happy, but she wasn't really thriving. And so like,
so I asked all those questions because, it's curious because sometimes we ask prayers, but like you prayed for her to have healing. And sometimes our prayers, we attach to them what our idea of healing means. And it's like, I don't know, she has healing.
Yeah.
She's free of a body that was not cooperating with her. So you could argue it, but I think your prayer was answered.
And honestly, when it happened, I would have adamantly disagreed. But I've come to kind of a point where I agree. I think that she really is healed. Like, it's really not the healing I had in mind.
Right. It's not what you wanted.
It's not what you wanted.
And so, the question is like, am I... And there's been times where if I've gotten what I wanted, it would have been better than how things turned out. And frequently the answer is no. Like, so.
And that's huge resilient insight too. That's a resilient mindset.
Absolutely. And I'm going to tell you what, you're among good company for that. We both would love to have our husbands, and we could argue a million ways in which life could be better. And yet at the same time, there's been a lot of growth on both of our parts individually and within our children and other people surrounding our loved one who is now gone. And so sometimes it's really hard to accept that sometimes with loss comes growth that in other ways may never have happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's hard to see that, but it's the truth. And because I've seen growth in my life, in my wife's life, my sister's life, my brother's life, my older brother's life, all of our lives who my mom had touched since her passing, that I think would be drastically different if she had not passed and if she was still in the state that she was. And I love her dearly, and if I could, would have loved to have more time with her. But also, while I was thinking about what I was going to say about this, because the previous episode I talked a lot about restoration, and I promise I'm not trying to make this into like any type of like sermon or anything like that, but it just kind of makes me think of the story of Moses. Okay, you got the Israelites being slaves in Egypt. Moses comes, takes them out. Right? They wander the wilderness for 40 years. Moses sees the promised land and dies, and never makes it into that promised land. But he got told, like, "Hey, your people, my people, are gonna have freedom," and he never got to that point.
He never got to see the reward.
Yeah. And, my mom was told, hey, everything she lost was going to be restored. And I don't know if that minister was like right or wrong in saying that. But looking at it, my mom kind of has that like Moses trajectory a little bit where she really, her life, the lessons, how she lived her life, the people she touched and encountered and the community she built and the things that she taught us, it was her going through that wilderness. And, she got to see a glimpse of like what the reward was from that. But because of all she did, I have a very happy life. There's still hard times. Like last year, my son was born, and he was born 2 months early, and it was in the NICU for 51 days. And we spent 4 hours a day in the hospital for 2 months on top of doing my 8-hour day job. And on top of making sure my 2-year-old still had parents that were
so hard.
But the stuff my mom had taught me is what I relied on in those situations, and showed me that when things get rough, it's important to be consistent. It's important to react in a way that you may not know what the next steps are going to be always. But you know what you may not know like 4 steps ahead of time, but you can always take that next step.
You take a baby step.
You take the one step that you know is right. And
I love this. It makes me think what you'd said in the last episode about how you were working on the campaign trail and thought, should I go help my mom in California? And your mom said, no, stay. And Michelle said that as a mother, how she viewed that. And I feel like your mother, she went through her wilderness so you could have the promised land. And she, I don't think would be disappointed in that. She
I was
paved that
wondering
way
about
for
that.
you to have maybe you and your siblings and her now grandchildren, your children, you're the living proof of that restoration. Maybe it wasn't restored to her in the way or the time that you might have thought, or even the minister himself might have thought would have happened. That, is kind of irrelevant. But
I'm curious,
you're living that beautiful life that she fought so hard to help you be able to live. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm curious, is all your siblings self-sufficient?
Oh, yeah.
Well-employed, gainfully employed? So, it's really interesting because you said your mom had struggled and had been on government assistance, and that was something she was really working to get off, and she wanted more for all of you. Look about the restoration that happened right there with all of her children not being dependent and being able to be productive citizens and engaged in their communities. I mean, that right there is a restoration for her.
Absolutely. And it truly is. And it's something that, like, I have to remind myself because, like, she sacrificed so much, and I've benefited from it. My siblings have all benefited from it. And I know she'd be proud of where we're all at. People keep telling me how, like, people say, like, oh, you do well, like, you're doing well. Like, my sister is so much better and so cool, so much cooler than I am. And so, like, if you guys could have got her, it would have been a better podcast. But all that is true. But there's still just days where I miss my mom.
Oh, yeah. It's both. It's absolutely both.
Yeah,
We like to say it's and.
It's and.
Yeah.
In fact, sometimes I think I'm going to write a book called It's And.
Oh, I love that. And that's what life is. Life is learning to live in the and. You don't have to be happy or sad. You can be both.
Yeah.
You can miss your mom and be at peace with the fact that she's not here. Like, it can be both.
Yeah, absolutely.
And some days it just sucks. Let's be honest about that. Some days you don't want to have a resilient mindset. Some days you don't want to get the big picture. Some days, some moments you're just in the moment saying, I wish they were here. I wish none of that had ever happened. I wish I never had to learn and grow a thing. I just wish for a few more minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to miss them. That is grief. And it's normal. And it's also, a beautiful reminder of the love that we had for that person that did live a great life with us, whether it was a spouse, a mother, a sibling, whoever, however that person impacted us. When we are the ones that are grieving, of course we're going to miss them, regardless of the beautiful opportunities or lessons or growth that we've had. Doesn't replace that we all would rather have the person that we love walking this life with us.
Yeah, and you're right. It's like you're saying, it's but some days it's more one side and some days it's more the other. But the lesson that was hard for me to kind of come with is that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. The important lesson is, like you're saying, it's there's going to be days where I'm thankful for her sacrifice, and there's going to be days where I really miss her. And it's okay because I'm allowed to miss my mom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to ask some follow-up questions and wrap this up. We'll be right back. And we're back. George, it's been such an interesting conversation. I love this concept of and that we agree on. And tell us, just in wrapping up, where are you moving forward now? Where is the trajectory? You said in our first episode, your mom said you've always got to know your next step. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes it takes a little moment. Where's your focus now?
Yeah, so right now, I've got a couple focus. First is being a father. I've got 2 under 2 right now, and so I literally was woken up this morning at 3 a.m. So that's kind of the first.
So sweet.
Yes, but
the funny thing is you think that that's going to quit by the time they're teenagers, and then you find out they still wake you up or keep you up or don't let you go to bed. It just gets different.
I remember how I was as a teenager, and I just pray my kids aren't like that. So, but I think for me, and part of the reason why I wanted to tell the story too is I think the next steps are I want to keep growing.
Yeah.
I want to keep going forward.
Yes.
Dealing with the struggles that I've had since my mom's passing. Earlier this year, my dad passed away as well. And so it was hard, but it was different. But there comes a point where just keep going forward is a win, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's where I'm at. The other thing I want to do is I've been really focused on building community lately. I've got some friends who one of my hobbies is sumo wrestling, right? And so I've been.
Oh, no, I did not know.
You just mentioned this so casually, like, hey, I'm a sumo wrestler.
Yeah, you know.
By the way,
sumo wrestling.
Okay, that's
no,
cool.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I actually partnered with Midvale for their Harvest Days and hosted a tournament here. We had about 25 different wrestlers from across the country come and compete.
Oh, no way.
Oh my goodness, this is
that's cool.
awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
But I've really been enjoying helping build that community, and be a part of being a part of it has been huge. And I've made some really good friends that were friends beyond just hitting each other. We're
Such a man thing to say.
Hey, bro.
yeah. And I think that what I really want to do is, I feel like I've learned a lot of lessons from my mom and from life and going through some of these hardships, and I want to be able to tell other people, like, hey, this is something you're going through, like, it sucks, but there's life after it.
Yeah.
And there's always opportunities to grow, to become a better person, and to give back. And so I think what I'm looking for next is those steps for me to grow, to put my family in a stable situation. I talked about earlier how I was just really struggling to find a job that I really enjoyed, but I ended up finding one that I love. I love my job now. And what I want to do is help other people who may be going through something, who may be not having like a good father experience and not having kind of the wisdom of like that old man wisdom that I'm not old. I'm getting there, but I'm not there. But I really want to help others in that way. So that's something that I've been working on. Not only do I have the sumo group, but there's also a group of men that I've been meeting with lately to kind of help build a community. I recently saw how, statistically speaking, your average guy doesn't have a ton of friends. And so I really wanted to fight that against the people.
I love that you're taking such initiative and just building connection among people and taking your own journey of life and helping other people on theirs. And I have to say, I love what you said. This sucks, but there's life after it. Oh, there's another book title, right? There's another T-shirt that to own the fact that life can be hard, but look at the beautiful life you're creating. After so much difficulty.
I've met men in different arenas, and I've come into several men who are working to change the environment of relationships with men. That they realize that they need to come together, and they need their own network, and they need their own kind of allies in connection.
Cool.
And women, we do it so well and easily, and men maybe not as much. And roles have really changed in our society. And I think that as those roles change, men do need more support. Yeah. And I think they always needed it,
sure,
but it just hasn't been innate. And I love that men are now seeking it and creating opportunity for others. So how would you like to see that?
It's one of those things that the way I've been functioning with it has kind of been a if you build it, they will come kind of situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, we it's kind of just been common things that I have with other friends,
mm-hmm.
and then just challenging my friends to be like, hey, do you know anyone else who's interested in this type of thing? We built in January, and going back to sumo, in January, me and one guy who his name's John, just started meeting in my garage, and he was training me. He's like in his 70s, and he trained in Japan for a while, so he started training me on how to do sumo. And then we're like, well, maybe this should be a club. Well, in August, we had almost 20 people in our club.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so,
that's so good.
Stuff like that, where it's just been a small common connection. This is probably going to be one of the dumbest things ever said on this podcast, but fantasy football has been one of the things that me and a bunch of my friends really connect and bond on.
Not dumb at all. So many people bond over that. Yeah,
I know.
And it's one of my friends, and he's like the fantasy football elements kind of become secondary. This is just I just get charged a fee to be a part of a group chat every year.
Right, exactly, right. It's because we're all craving connection. It's really the whole concept behind this podcast is to let people know you're not alone. We're all suffering. We all go through hard things. Nobody does this. Nobody's getting out of this life without a challenge. And we really do need each other. And in a time when we're so politically divided, more than anything, we need to start looking for the threads of connection. So thank you so much.
And I love how you're finding connection that works because, like you said, women, we kind of innately, we'll get together, we'll laugh, we'll cry, we'll have a book club, whatever. I don't know. We sit and talk and eat ice cream or who knows. But like, you're going to do fantasy football or you're going to do sumo wrestling. You're going to find something that engages the people you're connecting with in a meaningful way. And there's no right or wrong way to connect, right? Like the fact that you had 20 guys show up to the sumo club right away, like there's interest. There's a safe place for people to come together and say, hey, we're going to bond in our own way and we're going to create that connection. And it might not look like like you said, the social rules say it needs to or ought to look like. We just need each other. Absolutely.
And I think one other thing that kind of is connected to that I thought of when it comes to this too is just like how you're saying we're so politically divided. I also think one of my challenges for myself has been finding people who I don't necessarily agree with on those things that are dividing, because like a lot of times I found myself surrounding myself with people who are like me and
very conservative, by the way. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so at the end of the day, though, if I'm only surrounding people who are like me, I'm not.
Where's the growth?
Yeah, I'm not being challenged. My thoughts aren't being challenged. My actions aren't being challenged. Growth really comes from challenge.
Absolutely. Yeah. Are we really being challenged? And do we really understand the other side of the conversation? Yeah. Do we understand why somebody may have a less conservative viewpoint than ours? And does it have merit? And maybe are we not seeing a bigger picture, right? Because we can only see the world for our own lived perceptions.
Yeah.
And sometimes we need the perceptions of other people and to listen with an open heart in order to grow and expand our minds and our hearts. I love this because it's what we need more than anything in America today, right now, right?
And I think it goes beyond just political views too. Like, are the people that you surround yourself with, do they look just like you, like from like a race point of view, or do they look like you from
well, in Utah it's almost impossible. I mean, we have like what do you know what the current rate is? I mean, you're black, and I think it's like a 1% black population in Utah.
It's very small, so it's easier for me.
I moved here 32 years ago. And I cried and I said, everybody looks the same. I can't tell anyone apart. And my husband just thought that was hilarious, but I really honestly felt that way. I was from Sacramento. Mm-hmm. We had a population of all kinds of people, European, Russians, Asian, Black. I had mixed race friends. That wasn't abnormal. And so to come to Utah where it's still so white here.
And I think the thing about it is when it comes to building community, when it comes to even finding differences in race in a place that's can be seen as pretty homogenous, is the word I think of is intentionality. Mm-hmm. You have to be intentional about these things.
Great word.
Yep.
You have to be intentional to challenge yourself and go to places that aren't where you normally would.
Yeah.
And that's really something that every year my wife and I, we pick a word and we say that word is going to like be the guidance of this year. And 2 years ago, our word was intentional. And so
I love that. And I'm going to choose that for my word next year. It's always
Not a
been
great word.
gratitude for me. And this year I chose surrender, and I'm over this word. And
Done surrendering, thanks.
I'm over it. And actually, I think I'm just going to pick my new word today, and it's going to be intentional.
Nice.
So thank you for reminding me about that. Yeah, I love everything you have to say. We could
So
spend
good.
so much more time
I've got so
talking.
many notes I've taken.
Yeah, and we'll have to get together. In fact, I'd love to have your family up for dinner. So
Oh, that'd be great. We'd
thank
love
you.
it.
Yeah, thank
You
you.
said
for
2
coming.
under 2?
Yeah.
Oh, that's exhausting.
I'm all in grandma mode.
Yes,
Bring
so
me anyone
cute.
under
Bring-
8.
bring
My
up-
grandkids are starting to get a little old. My 2 grandsons are 8 and 10, and I'm like, oh man,
It's not quite as cute as 2 under 2.
yeah. I'm gonna have to start adopting grandchildren because my kids aren't having any.
I'll borrow a few.
I actually, my girlfriend has a little boy that's 4, and I've fallen in love with him. So
Oh, how sweet. So sweet.
You sound like my in-laws a couple years back. They were
Yeah. Where's your grandkids?
they were very much adopting other grandkids, because they're phenomenal. I love my in-laws.
Yeah.
Oh,
but
that's so good.
They really wanted some young kids to spend time with.
Hurry up.
it's
Well,
fun.
George, thank you for joining us now 2 weeks in a row. There's so much to learn. I appreciate that we kind of got your backstory and your story. I think it was
Yeah.
cool that we got to have you for a couple of episodes. So thank you for making time for both of those. And
I love that his story, and it's true for all of us, right? Your backstory really lends color and
yes.
reference
Yeah.
to what has gone on in your life and where you are today. And I just love it. And I love getting to know you more. And I love all the pieces of this. It's all about growth and development. It's all about self-awareness and that inner growth that we all really get to do, unless you just want to stay stuck and miserable, you know?
Like you said, I want to keep growing.
all along those coaching lines, you know? Anyway,
Yeah.
thank you for joining us.
I want to keep growing, George said. So to all of our listeners, we hope you've enjoyed what you've heard today. If you missed the first episode of this, please go back to last week and find it. You'll want to hear both of them, I promise. Like Michelle said, they connect so well. They paint the picture. They let you see the depth of who George is today and the great work he's doing in his home and in his community and professional life. We would also love to hear from you, to our listeners. If you have a story that you're willing to share, we would love if you'd reach out to us and let us give you an opportunity to teach us what you've learned along your own way. You can email us at rrpodcast@ksl.com or find us on social media at Relentlessly Resilient or Relentlessly Resilient Podcast. There's a little button you can click that'll connect you to Michelle, and you can have a quick conversation about what you might share and if it's a good fit for the show. As always, if you can find us on your favorite podcast platform and give us a like, a rating, and a review, that helps us be seen by more people and also helps us know how we can improve the show.
And whatever you do today, remember to be kind. You have no idea the struggles others are dealing with in their life. Have a great day.